We have Laura here today, and we're talking about medications and eczema. Laura is a fellow eczema warrior. She used topical steroids, been through TSW, was on Dupixent, and we're going to chat about her journey being on Dupixent and also healing naturally, because a lot of people have this view that there's one or the other. If you need to go on a medication because you're going through something like topical steroid withdrawal, which I don't know myself, but from what I've seen and heard, one of the hardest periods of life, having something like Dupixent can help just give some relief while you have space to do that work. And that was part of Laura's journey, is that it was never long term, but it helped her mentally to get through that, and also physically too. We'll talk about Laura's journey, and then also we'll open it up to a Q&A at the end as well. Laura, welcome. Can you give us a little insight about your eczema coming back and then the steroids and TSW?
Got you, absolutely. Yeah, so I think for me, I always had it as a child, and it was the classic kind of story where it kind of disappeared when I was around a teenager, but really suffered quite severely in my early years. And then when I went to university and I was sort of left to my own devices, and I was cooking for myself for the first time, and stress of exams, and this new exposure to alcohol and partying, I started to see kind of little patches crop up around my eyes and on my arms. I was horrified because it was on my face, and I was 21, I was single, I wanted to go out and live my life. And I went to the doctors, and the first thing that the doctor did was prescribe me a steroid. And I did what I was told, and I put my steroid on, and the kind of cycle of putting the cream on, waiting for maybe, I think it began about a week before I'd have to use a steroid again, and then it slowly, that time frame slowly started to diminish. So every couple of days, every day, I was using steroids, and it was popping up. So it started a little bit on my eyes and my arms, and then it was on my chest, and then it was on my legs, and then it was on my back, and it was kind of whack-a-mole with the cream, right? And I used steroid cream consistently, pretty daily, for nearing about 8 years. From that point, progressively getting stronger and stronger. And I went to private dermatologists to see if there was a different way, and it was the same kind of thing. I then got prescribed my first dose of oral steroids, and that was a pretty dark slope. I started taking a lot of courses of oral steroids while still using my cream. And then COVID happened. It's interesting because it's never just one thing, right? The eczema was kind of being masked by the steroids, but I was having severe gut issues. I was allergic to everything. I was very swollen in the face. I had colds all the time. I wasn't very well at all. COVID kind of hit, and my access to these medications severely were impacted by the climate of the world. And it was a bit of a wake-up call that something was going wrong. And me and my family decided that I wouldn't take steroids, and I went pretty cold turkey. And that was when my experience with topical steroid withdrawal started, and it was a pretty tough place. So I was pretty signed off of work. I couldn't move at all, really. I was pretty bedbound for a couple of weeks. And moving into, it was during lockdown, so not to diminish the profundity of what everyone went through, it was a really tough time, but for me it was a healing time because I couldn't go out anyway. But I was in severe pain, and that's where Dupixent came into my life. Yeah.
You go through this tricky period with your eczema, and the trajectory is go to the doctor, you get topical steroids. Let me know in the chat if anybody has gone through that. I definitely have. And then you use it as a crutch. So it's kind of like a safety blanket. I would have it in my little zip everywhere I'd go, just in case. But then you don't have the disclaimer that if you use it long term, consistently, that you can get topical steroid withdrawal. And this is just what's coming out in people's experiences and now in the research too, which is really great. So what we're talking about today is using different medications with eczema responsibly and how to use them. I don't want to bash medications because there's a time and a place, and there's definitely situations exactly like Laura's where if we do have a client who's going through topical steroid withdrawal and it affects you mentally and emotionally and physically to the point where you can't leave your house and you can't function day to day, that it can give you a break. But then also it's almost like some people are like, okay, cool, I'm on Dupixent, and then that's it. And so with the medications, just understanding that it's blocking an inflammatory response. The steroids and Dupixent, they work on different pathways in your body, but they're all blocking the inflammation, right? So they're just, like you said on your first interview, it's like putting paint on a derelict house. That always is stuck in my head. So you still have the rotting and the moldy structure underneath. So what we're talking about today is how you can utilize both when to heal. And that's, with conventional medicine, there's nothing, I don't want to bash it because it saves lives and extends lives. And if you have chronic diseases, it can help with that. But understanding that doctors use the tools that they have, and that's predominantly medications. And there's a huge gap in between of supporting your body, right? Looking at your gut, looking at your nervous system, your hormones, and having that more alternative approach rather than just putting a medication on. But it's okay if you need a medication to use it while you do that work healing. Thanks for letting me just interject there.
No, of course.
Back to what you were saying, Laura, just about going through TSW. So what was that like in terms of how it affected you day to day, mentally, emotionally, physically?
Yeah, it's pretty debilitating, right? I think you're saying it right. It's not about fear mongering or, medication bashing, but the reality is I had no idea about the consequences of what I was doing. And I was using steroids consistently for 8 years, on and off for 8 years. And it literally is a withdrawal. Your skin is kind of addicted in some capacity. So it was debilitating is the best word. I found it really difficult to move. It was like my skin was almost open, like raw. I wasn't able to work. Mentally, I really suffered. And I think anyone else who's been through it will be able to resonate with that, especially my age as well, being young, and I was single, and my confidence was completely. I didn't have the ability to look at myself in the mirror. I wasn't able to. It was a very difficult time for my confidence. More than anything was like this dread that this would be the rest of my life forever. And that, being frank, like, do I want to live my life? If this is what my reality is for the rest of my life, this pain and the way I look, is this going to be forever? That was a really tough kind of conflict that was happening, because you don't know how long it's going to last, right? Like 8 months is a long time.
Huge. That's huge to be in pain for that long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you were saying with the steroids, so what it does, the steroids, is when you have inflammation, your blood vessels dilate to help let out all of your immune cells to go to that site and fight the inflammation. The steroids are really effective because it vasoconstricts and tightens your blood vessels so they're not as permeable. So what happens when you're on them for long periods of time, especially if you come off them cold turkey, your blood vessels, because they've been tightened for so long, they can vasodilate again. So your blood vessels essentially become leaky, which is what they do to let out your immune factors and your white blood cells and whatnot. But then what you're saying is that it's open. So you get that red skin syndrome where it's just red, raw, burning, and then that, how people describe it, that bone dying itch where it's like so deep you can't scratch it. And that's the huge red flag, is when people say it doesn't feel like my normal eczema. Then we're like, okay. And obviously you have the long-term steroid use. And again, not saying that don't use steroids, but it's about using them responsibly. That guidelines on how to use them, because they've acknowledged TSW, and they said 3 to 5 days max, where all of us back in the day were just using it whenever we needed it. So again, not to create fear, but it's about having the knowledge and the understanding of how it works to prevent that happening. So thanks, Laura, for describing what that was like and how debilitating that was for 8 months. So then the next step for Laura was, well, okay, there's this medication, Dupixent, that can help reduce some of this inflammation and open blood vessels and help get me out of this. So let me know what the process was when you were deciding to do that and getting started on Dupixent.
Yeah, it was a really difficult decision to make, actually. I'd been out of the count for about 8 months, and it got to the point where I was a little bit more functional. It wasn't so open, just looked very dry and scaly. It was visually unpleasant, but less physically uncomfortable for me. And I had to go back to work, and everything started to open up again. Life started to get back into its flow, and I went to a doctor and I was offered Dupixent. And after a couple of weeks of being back in school and people commenting on my face and on my skin and TMI, but literally wiping skin off the desk after a ride, because you're literally shedding. I was like, I'm not doing this. It was a bit of a conflict of values because I'd gone through my 8 months doing everything so naturally. And I think I said before in one of my other interviews, it's such a mental, I think anyone who goes through it is incredibly brave because every day you know that it will go away if you put steroids on it and you make that decision not to with the long-term goal of healing this naturally. So making that decision took a long time, a couple of weeks, but eventually it was for my mental health.
Yep. More
than anything, and earning money again. And I decided to take those medications. And I think interestingly, looking back on it now, I'm not sure how well advised I was or how much research I did by myself before I made that decision to then go back on medication, which is an interesting reflection.
Yeah, the whole identity piece is really, really hard because in our society, there's so much pressure to look and be a certain way, and you have that taken away, it's tough. And then also just the comments from everybody too is hard. Yeah. And in addition to everything else you're going through. So Dupixent came, and then back then there wasn't as much. I mean, it's a new drug, no. So there's no long-term data on it.
Yeah.
But again, like we always say, the main thing is your mental emotional state. So if it's going to give you a little bit of relief, okay, do that. Then we can look at next steps long-term, work with your doctor, obviously, and taper off, depending on what people want to do. Did you have any side effects with Dupixent?
Yeah, I did. Significant.
Okay. What was side effects?
I put on weight because I'd lost a lot of weight in topical steroid withdrawal. I dropped a lot of weight, and it very quickly came back when I went onto Dupixent. My hair started to fall out. I got the classic itchy eyes. And then other things which I'm not 100%, I don't know if anyone else has resonated with this, but felt very I was catching things very easy. So I always had colds or always had a runny nose. And then after being on it for a while, I started to notice that I was achy. I was feeling a little bit older, almost, than I was. That was a bit of a turning point for me to be like, oh, I'm just masking this in a different way.
Yeah. So with Dupixent, they call it biologic, but it's essentially still an immunosuppressant. It's blocking interleukin 4 and 13 pathway. So it's very, very common. If anybody here is on Dupixent, have you noticed any side effects? Let me know in the chat. Those ones across the board are very common. And you're lucky it didn't affect your vision at all.
No, I know that's another common one. It didn't. I just had very itchy eyes. They were red and itchy.
And Cassie, who has been through the program, the Love Your Skin program, and also works in it now as a coach, she had gotten red face from it. So she had never gotten eczema on her face previously. And then since being on Dupixent, there was no warnings or disclaimers on that one. But then she found a study just on her research showing that could be a side effect, but it's not what they present right away. Again, that world's completely changed now. There is a lot more education and guidance on what might happen. But again, it is understanding, and my hope, if you are going through chronic eczema or TSW, is that you use that time when you do get a break from it to start looking at, what's happening under the hood and in my body. So that was when you came to Love Your Skin program, is that you wanted to look at, how can I come off of this and actually address what's coming up? So can you tell me a little bit about that transition for you?
Yeah, for sure. I knew that I wanted to come off. I felt very uncomfortable, especially as the side effects started to become more obvious. That's what, again, I think that's another classic. People who've been on these meds with eczema will understand. At the beginning, you're like, wow. And then they lose their efficacy after a while because obviously, as you said, the inflammation's still there. It's actually building without you even realizing it. So because you can't see the symptoms anymore. And I actually think that's an interesting thing to say. I think as well, I had this really beautiful journey in a way with my topical steroid withdrawal and learned so much about nutrition. I did the best I could with what I could, Googling online, etc., etc. And I really made the effort. And then when I went on to Dupixent, that was almost like oh, well, I don't have it anymore. And I went back to overworking and drinking and eating all the foods. And I saw it as like a free pass. Like, yes, I can go back to the old me. Which is the beautiful thing about a symptom, is that it's the communication from the body asking you to do something. And if you're not letting that come through, then you don't feel that you need to make that effort. So that was definitely in my mind, and the symptoms started to get worse and worse. And then I found the Love Your Skin program, and I remember having a call with a coach, and I said one of my goals was to come off of Dupixent, and it was really terrifying. I'd been on it for about a year at that point, and it was a really terrifying thing to admit to myself. And I had a lovely conversation around the safe ways of doing that. And it doesn't have to be the topical steroid thing I was forced into. And I'm so glad I was, but it really halted my life. And I was terrified that that was going to be the cold turkey experience of Dupixent, which it doesn't, we can talk about, but it doesn't have to be. And yeah, so I think that was when I decided that I didn't want to keep taking this every 2 weeks, and had someone tell me that I could be supported through that process. And I made that decision then, okay, like when the time is right, then I will come off this medication for sure.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that you just went back to your old habits, because having eczema, chronic eczema, and you go down that path of healing, you realize the impact of your daily behaviors and your daily choices and what you do and what you think every day has on your skin. Everybody who finishes the program, if you watch the interviews, it's the same thing that they say again and again, because it's true. So it's interesting that, you know, like, oh, sweet, a free pass. And yeah, we just see it so often where people do think, okay, cool. Yeah, like I do have a free pass. But for a lot of people, symptoms do increase, or their rashes keep coming back. So again, you don't want to waste that free pass, so to speak, while you can do that work. And then again, like I was saying, a lot of people think that it's either one or the other. So you can do both at the same time. So yeah, what was that like for you starting your healing journey?
Yeah, I never would have been able to do it without the Love Your Skin program. It was a process, right? I didn't come off until I think my fourth month or something, fourth or fifth month into the program. I did a lot of like preliminary work with my practitioner in terms of strengthening my gut, balancing my hormones, and doing a little bit of work on my root causes, because obviously they were still there when we actually did a bit of investigating. Everything that was, all the markers that were out, they, you know, that was identifiable to my practitioner. So I was able to do all of that work, and we found, you know, I think I spoke about this, but there was parasites going on and all sorts of different things. I also did a lot of work with Mandy, my mindset coach, around the mental piece of it and getting prepared mentally for coming off the meds. It wasn't a quick snap decision like it was for the topical steroid withdrawal, like making space for it, communicating with the body, and really getting my nervous system into a state that could hold whatever was going to come when we came off the meds, which was a bit important to me because I was so terrified of making that leap. We did it slowly. I went from taking it every 2 weeks to taking it every 3 weeks to taking it every 4 weeks to 5 weeks. It was really difficult at first because I wasn't showing as many symptoms because I was taking the medication, right? So I wasn't showing that many symptoms. So I had to really find the future me's purpose when I was making this decision and making this commitment. But I had so much support, both physically, but also emotionally, which really put me in the right kind of position to eventually decide not to take the next injection.
Yeah. It's so hard. Again, exactly like the steroids, where you know that if you take it, that it'll go away. And
100%.
with coming off Dupixent, there can be rebound flares, right? Because obviously there's blocking the inflammatory pathways. I like what you said, and thanks for highlighting the fact that you did so much foundational work at the beginning, because when you go in, and especially if you have a lot of gut overgrowths, like parasites, bacterial overgrowths, yeast, or whatever's coming up. So while you're on the medications, it's actually good to do all that work. Get rid of all that inflammation, because if you think of your body as a bucket, it's all the inflammation that's contributing to the eczema and that overflows. So you have your gut overgrowth, hormone imbalances, nutrient deficiencies, might be heavy metals, mold, whatever it is, that overflows the bucket and which creates a flare. So if we can reduce that load of inflammation when you come off Dupixent, and again, working with your doctor and with us in a structured, slow, tapered way, then you don't have as much of a rebound. And I like what you said about the mental and emotional piece, especially if you've had TSW or if anybody has had a period where their eczema has impacted them mentally and emotionally, because your nervous system is programmed so amazing that if it senses anything that is connected to something that's been really impactful or really hard, right, you go into mayday mode, cannot go back there. And then that's where that anxiety, okay, I need to move, I need to do something different, which again, you use your crutch, which would be the medication. So really having that why and that support, if that's your long-term goal, is to come off of it, to help you through that, because that's just your innate response in your nervous system to not go back to that really hard period of life again, which is amazing. So really understanding that that is going to come up and noticing, okay, that's what's happening right now. And then instead of reacting, you could respond to, okay, what do I actually want to do? I have support. This is the path. Those are big things that come up. And I would say the mental emotional piece when going through TSW or tapering off of medications or going through chronic eczema in general is the biggest piece, either for healing or the biggest piece that will hinder the healing process. And so what were your flares like when you came off the medication?
It definitely got a little bit worse before it got better. I was prepared for that. The way, and maybe you can explain this a little bit, Alicia, because I don't actually understand the science of why, but it makes sense when we're talking about it from an immunosuppressant perspective. But mine was it was a big immune response. So the eczema essentially went back pretty much to what it was before topical steroid withdrawal for a little bit, nowhere near as severe. I think, as you said, because I'd done so much preliminary work, it was getting out what it needed to get out, but much more, it felt like a bit of a detox rather than this chronic state. The thing that I suffered with most was this immune response. The hives, really severe, like itching my eyes and sneezing, but the hives were on and off for about a week. They would come all over the body and like really red, itchy hives. But I will say that kind of process lasted about a week and a half, which when you compare it to the 8 months of topical steroid withdrawal that I went through about 3 years before, yes, it was definitely a tough week, maybe 2 at most, but it definitely, the preliminary work I did was it was very obvious that had made a massive impact in my body.
Yeah. So again, if you're in simple terms, putting paint on a derelict house, all of the mold and rotting timber and wood underneath is still there. So then all of a sudden, when that paint comes off, it's kind of the same thing. You have these immune responses. It's so common with coming off of any medications, having that rebound immune response. But again, tapering down slowly is the key, because if you just come off cold turkey, then all of a sudden this medication that's been blocking the response, and you don't have that, let's say, that blanket, then it can come back a lot worse. So the fact, I'm sure that 1 and 2 to 2 week period was a lot for you, but in the greater scheme of things, that's a nice transition period. So yeah. And I like what you said before too, just about when you do that work, understanding that your flares are little signals. So it's your engine light going off. And I always notice when I'm pushing myself, and there's always a snowball effect, because, okay, maybe there's some mental or emotional stress that's happening, and then you get caught up in your head and flurrying around, and then you're not eating as well, and then you're not sleeping as well, and then all the pillars, the eczema healing pillars, the mindset, sleep, nutrition, digestion, movement, finding connection, they all go down one by one. It always happens. So what is that like for you now? Because you can't cure eczema, but you can definitely heal it, and then you can have the tools to prevent and manage your flares. And so what is that like for you now, being able to use your eczema to communicate what I need to do?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I took from the program and my journey in the program. And look, we're not always going to get it right. We're humans. I get it wrong still. And like you say, I still get eczema. When I'm pushing myself mainly, that's my biggest thing now. Because it's funny, I said before that when I went on Dupixent, it gave me a free pass to go back to old habits. Because of the way the process works in the Love Your Skin program, it didn't feel like I was just doing like a diet. You know, I changed my habits. The way I eat has changed. The way I sleep has changed forever, consistently. That they're important things to me now. It's not something, if I got a free pass, be like, woohoo, I'm going to stay up till 1 a.m. now. I don't enjoy that anymore. I'm changed, which is really beautiful, actually, because it doesn't feel like an effort. For me now, the way that my skin tells me I need to ask for help, which I'm learning still, but I do. When I need help, I ask for it. And it tells me when it's time to slow down and to get back to myself. And that's a really beautiful thing, because now that communication means that I won't go back to the old way of living with my eczema, because I will always be able to catch it now, because I'm ahead of it, right? It communicates with me when it's just getting there. And now I'm ahead of it. I can, as I said, I can ask for help. I can implement the tools that I have that I know are going to support me. And it is hard sometimes. It definitely is hard. But it's a hell of a lot harder when you don't know what to do. It's a hell of a lot harder.
And you go into panic mode too, right? If you get a little tingle or flare and you're like, oh no, what is it? Is it my food? Okay, I'm going to stop eating all these food. Is it the dust? You start cleaning your house. Now it's like, oh yeah. There's a lot going on right now. I get why my body is yelling out for help. So it's nice to have that compassion and understanding rather than going back into default and going into Mayday mode. And then just having the tools to be able to manage it. And if you do need support, when I had a postpartum flare, I had one in pregnancy and then postpartum. And then, I need to do it, like ask for help. I need to do a GI map, look what's going on, because your environment's changing, your gut's always changing. For example, Mandy in the program, she's been through the program years ago and she's worked as a mindset coach. And she lives at the Northern Rivers, and there's devastating floods up there. So there's so much mold. And then she'd been exposed to some metals too. So you do have to check in every now and again. And it's okay to reach out for help, which is hard because as eczema warriors tend to find it hard to ask for help and just don't want to bother anybody else. And that's a huge part of my process too. Actually, is there anybody here in the chat that is always doing for other people, wanting to make sure everybody else is okay, but sometimes it comes at your own expense? Let me know. Pop a yes in the chat. Yeah. When we're on the calls all the time, everybody's like, yeah. And we're all in care roles. You're a teacher, and actually you're working in the Love Your Skin program too now. So yeah, it is something that comes up. So really doing that internal work and seeing, okay, is this something that I'm doing again? Am I not having boundaries for myself, for my health? Is that something that I need to strengthen and work on? And it's just a lifelong journey of ebbing and flowing and having that compassion and understanding. It's kind of fun. It's like, okay, well, what do I need to work on now, rather than it just being this big weight that you have to carry? Yeah. All right. So we chatted for ages, but does anybody here have any questions? Pop it in the chat. Somebody had noted that their eczema had gotten better, but then had gotten psoriasis. Yeah, somebody said been on Dupixent for 1.5 years. There were side effects at the start, but not now. Back, same one. Feeling anxious about being on a medication after a lifetime of eczema and intense TSW for a few years. Would love to come off Dupixent. Dupixent made me 100 times worse. Didn't work at all. So there's so many different experiences. We obviously deal with the more extreme cases. But yeah, I had a conversation with Erica recently, and she had only gotten eczema later on in life in her 30s. And then just being told, oh, you have to be on medications for the rest of your life. You're like, I'm 30 years old. So the biggest thing I just wanted to get across is that there's so many options. Like, while it can be helpful to get you through a really tricky period, there's also healing work that you can do. And it might feel like, okay, maybe for other people and not for me. Like, when we look at lab tests, and especially GI maps, like 98% of the time, there's always something there that we can work on. And I say that very conservatively. But with eczema, there's always something that's happening in the gut. Nervous system regulation, those are the two main things. And then, of course, other little hidden infections and hormone imbalances. So there's so much that you can do if you want to be weaning off a medication. So Let me see. I was scrolling up for a little while. I don't see. Oh, so Jack had said, how long did the tapering process take you?
It took quite a while because I tried to do, I've got to remember my numbers correctly, Jack, but I think it's like I tried to do kind of like 2 injections in between each. So I did 2 weeks an injection, 2 weeks an injection. Then I did 3 weeks an injection, 3 weeks an injection. Like I tried to do you know what I mean? Like 2 injections on each time frame. And I got all the way to 5 weeks. And that was after I'd done 2 injections on 5 weeks. Then I didn't take another injection after that. And after that, 5 weeks in between the second injection after that, that was when I started to experience the immune response for a couple of weeks. So I think all in all, it was a couple of months, the tapering process, with a couple of months of prep work before.
Yeah. And it's also helpful, A, to do the prep work, address what's causing inflammation inside the body, like we are talking about, but also understanding your triggers. So for some people, their skin is a little bit more sensitive in the winter. Some people, it's in the summer when it's hot and humid. Everybody's different. It's one or the other usually. So being able to work around that. And then also, yeah, if I do get a flare, is it okay with what's going on in life? So can I just say no to plans and just ride it through is also helpful. Yeah. So somebody else said, thinking about going on it, not sure what to do. Yeah, it's really, and I mean, our clients we have that are especially going through TSW, just giving you all the facts and knowing that, okay, there's a lot that you can do. So always the first check-in is how are we doing mentally, emotionally? Doing the gut work like Laura did first, like even if you're not going through TSW, that makes such a difference. We've worked with near 1,000 people with eczema and doing the gut work, balancing your hormones, looking at just the basic lifestyle factors that we're talking about, mindset, sleep, nutrition, digestion, movement, fun, and connection makes a huge, huge difference. And then, yeah, making a decision based off that. But again, if you're in a really dark place, which having chronic eczema can lead to that because of the isolation, the identity piece, and just not being able to function, it is really tough. So yeah, just understanding side effects and then for each of them being okay with if that happens. And then also looking at, well, what are the long-term goals? That would be my advice. Any other advice on your end, Laura?
Yeah, I think the main thing now is what I didn't have. And if I definitely was thinking about it now, I would read about the consequences because I think new data is coming out every day with Dupixent and some of the side effects are getting a little bit more serious now that we know a little bit more about the drug. So I would definitely advise reading those so you're fully informed. And then, like Alicia said, I think it's really battling that shame. And I think one of the best ways to, if you don't want to be on medication, but you need something, I needed something. I was so sad and I'd been through so much with my skin and Dupixent did save me for that little period, right? So I think one of the things that you can do if you do make the decision to give yourself a bit of relief, use it, as Alicia said, use it as the relief you need to do the healing that you need to do. If going on it is making you uncomfortable, relieve the shame by allowing yourself the time and the space to actually deal with what's happening internally. And it helps you give yourself a little bit of love because you know that you're not using it as like a long-term, if your long-term goal is to not be on medication, of course.
Yeah. Beautifully put, Laura. And Em had a question. Would you recommend Dupixent if you were still in the same position again? Would you still use it?
Oh, that's a good question. I will answer by saying that if I had found, I know this sounds really cheesy, but if I hadn't have found what I found in the program, if I was back literally in the same place without the knowledge, without the anything else, then yes, I don't regret taking it because I needed it and I know that I needed it. And like I said, it gave me the motivation to then actually get better. Now, would I use it again, knowing what I know with the data and with the tools that I have? No, I wouldn't.
Yep. Interesting. I would have thought that you still would have said yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm in a mentally much better position, right? Like I have so
In
much
hindsight,
information. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question. Good question.
It was.
And then Raquel said, does environmental allergies trigger eczema? If so, what allergy shots help? Really good question. Environmental allergies Yeah, can be a huge trigger for eczema. So there's the atopic triad. There's atopic dermatitis and allergies and asthma, and they're all connected. They're all immune conditions. And if you can understand that 70 to 80% of your immune system's in your gut, start there. So we have so many clients that have chronic allergies, obviously. And one of the biggest wins for me as a practitioner, and we have weekly meetings with the naturopaths and nutritionists in the program that help all of our clients. And every time when we get back an IgE allergy result, after doing that gut work, the nervous system work, and working on the lifestyle factors, we can see that allergic response, the immune response in the body reduce. And I'm just like, oh, every time I have this like guilty pleasure of just like being able to see the results go down. So your question is, if so, will allergy shots help? Look, if that's what you want to do the desensitization, where essentially you're just like putting a little bit in to sensitize yourself, that is an option. But we have so many people that come through the program that don't actually need to do it in the end because they do all that work healing their gut. So I would suggest, for me, the way that my brain works is, okay, do no harm. What could I do to heal, work on my gut, to heal from the inside out? Okay, if that doesn't work, then, and I've done everything that I could, then yeah, look into that. But there's so much you can do to work on that. It has been mentioned for me to go back on Dupixent, but what's holding back my specialist is a cost because insurance doesn't cover it. So again, if you're in a tricky spot and your eczema is really chronic, look at what's happening inside the body. I will humbly say, book a call with my team. You can book a call with Laura. She works in the program now because this journey has completely changed her life. And now she's on the other side helping support people as well. So it is a big cost, and insurance doesn't, and the medical system doesn't cover it in every country. So it is expensive, especially if you're doing fortnightly, biweekly injections. It's a huge cost. So there is so much that you can do. Oh, good question. Laura, what are the hardest changes you had to make to heal naturally?
You know what? That's such a good question, and it's triggering because it's still the change that I have to do now, right? It's not something that just is like fixed. It's an ongoing thing, but it's doing too much. It's pushing, really, that was the hard, doing what my practitioner told me in terms of my supplementation. It was really about including foods. That was a big thing for me, including food. I found that really joyous and easy. The movement I found great. None of that for me was difficult. Really, the most difficult thing for me was my nervous system, because I have been in a chronic state of fight or flight for literally 28 years. So to then be told you need to slow down and you need to prioritize yourself, and as like a chronic people pleaser, a go, working a million jobs, like all these ideas, entrepreneur, blah, 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 to just be like one thing at a time. And that was even something I struggled with when I went through the program. I got told off so many times, like, slow down. Just one thing at a time, just trust. And I think
it's so hard for everybody.
It's so hard. But I think that for me was doing the deeper work of rewiring the nervous system. But caveat that with the most beautiful challenge that I could have taken on. Yeah.
It's hard because this is rewiring the brain-skin connection. It's a piece that everybody misses in conventional and even alternative medicine. That's the field that I'm in, but there's still gaps there because your nervous system, like I was saying before, will always go back to default, what's easy. So if your default is always like busy on the go, doing for other people, never thinking about yourself, like, all right, if there's a lot going on, okay, I'm not sleeping, my thoughts are like a little hamster wheel going round and round, and then I'm not eating as well, and it's just this huge snowball effect. If that's your default, it is really hard to rewire that. And it takes time and patience and consistency. And it is something that you continuously have to rewire. But the longer that you do it, you notice, oh, I'm doing that thing again. Okay. And then again, you're like, oh, I get why I'm getting a little tickle here. Yeah. So really is learning to work with it, but it's hard for sure. It's hard. And it's the piece that not everyone, a lot of people breeze over. And every time I'm just like, oh, I wish they would have like dug into that one a little bit more. But when you do, and some people are in different timelines, like Mandy said, it was her last month in the program where she had that aha moment about her mindset and just the thoughts in her head, how they were affecting her skin. It doesn't matter when it happens on your journey, but when it does, it's life-changing. Oh, and a good follow-up question from Jenny. What was the biggest change you saw in your mental emotional health after you healed?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think I'll piggyback off what you just said, Alicia. I think it's the ability to be like, wow, that's happening again. Like having the awareness, because the awareness is great, but then if you don't have the tools to do anything about it, that can actually be quite overwhelming in itself. So that was a bit of a journey, because I had the awareness and then I was like, but this is who I am. What do I do now? Then learning how I could actually implement tools so that I could do something about the go, go, go. I think that will be my biggest shift. And I don't think I've ever shared this before. It's quite personal, but I will. Since the program and things with my eczema, I think even when things are really difficult or challenging or stressful, or I am having a little flare or whatever, nothing feels too bad anymore. It always feels like, oh, this is the hard bit. Let's ride this bit out because the good bit's going to come. Whereas I think before the program, those low moments felt quite all consuming, like, oh, is this forever? Whereas now everything feels just a little bit lighter, is what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you've gone through impactful moments and you give yourself space to reflect and learn from them, you realize that when you do have hard moments that come up, that there's growth in it. And when they come up again and again, you get this strength. So it's not as daunting when they do come up. I always say, they never waste a crisis. What am I going to learn from it? What am I going to gain from it? Okay, cool. And it just makes you stronger and stronger. So it really is just having a different light on those experiences, because you could just go like, Mayday, oh, that's happening to me again, and just go into a darker place. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. The way that you approach things is just different.
Exactly that. It's like the approach to it. It's like, oh, you know, when you have been through something like topical steroid withdrawal and then going off, like all of those things, the whole eczema journey, I do feel like pretty invincible as a person because of everything I've gone through, which is a great feeling, you know?
Yeah. That's having that strength. So Sabrina said, what might be the biggest tip for mold-caused eczema? I've gone through that journey and I have mold in my house. And we see this come up again and again. Get rid of the mold, definitely. And look, I'm a hypocrite because I'm still living in it, but do what you can if you can't move, just to try and keep it at bay as much as possible and try and kill it. But it's really just working on your immune system. So looking at, has the mold colonized in my body? So for somebody who doesn't have a sensitive immune system, like us eczema warriors, we do. And typically we're more prone to have the mold colonization in our body. Because some people, like my partner, doesn't get fazed by it. But for me, when I'm at my house, I was just in Fiji for 3 months and I could breathe clearly. I could sleep at night without having to mouth breathe. It was amazing. As soon as I came back to my house, blocked up. So that's a huge red flag. But yeah, just doing some testing to see if it's colonized in your body, because mold is a tricky little bugger. It essentially takes over your immune system, and then there's a flow-on effect. So mold and candida, they are little partners in crime too. So looking at to see if you have any candida overgrowth, and then also that creates an environment for heavy metals to thrive too. So there's a lot of flow-on effects, and also it affects different body systems too. So addressing it, you can get some mycotoxin tests done, and then obviously you got to deal with the gut first. I see so many people just jumping into these detoxes. If you can't eliminate and you don't have an immune system that has some resiliency, you'll just go into a flare up. So yeah, really important pieces. Again, if you're dealing with that, I'd say book a call with the team and let's chat, because mold is a long game. Yeah. So Jack said, what are your thoughts on the 2024 study that people taking Dupixent had a 4 times higher rate of developing T-cell lymphoma? Is that more of a concern for long-term use? So for me, and reading stats in the studies on long-term use, yeah, that would be a concern for me. Exactly like Laura said, okay, at that point in her mental emotional state, okay, I'm going to use this just to get through this period and then do the work healing. Knowing this research, that's a pretty good motivator. Yeah. And again, not instilling fear or anything, but there's lots that you can do in the middle there. All right, we will answer a few more So for women, does perimenopause cause flare-ups? I'm 38. I've made so many lifestyle changes, but still have flare-ups. Yeah, we actually did an interview with Lisa maybe a couple months ago. I'd scroll down on the Insta page and have a look at it. If you want, DM me, Lisa, and the team can send it to you if you can't find it. But she had started going through perimenopause, and yeah, it is just the hormone shifts creates inflammation. So what helps keep the menopause symptoms at bay is reducing inflammation. So essentially everything that we do in the Love Your Skin program helps minimize perimenopause. I know so many practitioners that are specializing in perimenopause, and I was just like, yay, you know, all the eczema warriors. You're doing everything to minimize menopause. Yeah, there is a direct correlation. I actually did a post recently too on the connection there. So that's a common trigger. How was the inflammation while switching to the holistic way of healing? You kind of already described that, I think, just with the rebounds. Yeah, and the hives.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah.
So last question. How long were you on Dupixent before you stopped using it? That's a good question.
I believe it was about a year, and then I said, I'm just not going to take it, and had a big flare up. I think I did about 2 months in between that where I didn't take it, and then I went back on for about another 7 or 8 months. So it was about nearly 2 years in total before I finally came off with the Love Your Skin program. Yeah.
Oh, and then there was a question that I breezed past. Somebody had said that Dupixent wasn't covered, but methotrexate is, and asking about that. Again, look at the side effects. What I'll do, because we'll hop off here. Actually, I could even connect you to Gemma. She talks about it in her interview because she went on methotrexate. And again, there's a lot of side effects. My recommendation, like I've been talking about before, is what can you do to support your body? And again, if you need to use it for mental, emotional reasons, okay, but then let's do that work healing in between because of the side effects. All right. I thought this was going to be like a 20-30 minute conversation. Oh, but it's always nice chatting. And there's some really good questions. And yeah, I hope from this call gives people hope that there's a lot that you can be doing if your insurance doesn't cover it, if you're on it, if you want to wean off, and a little bit of guidance on how to do that. But yeah, Laura now has been through the journey and is now on the other side, and she's working in the program. So if anybody wants to chat with her, comment Laura below and we can connect you and have a chat about the Love Your Skin program, what we do, working on the lifestyle factors, getting to the root cause, and having that support if you do want to wean off, or just healing your eczema in general. Thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you, Laura, for sharing.
Thank you so much.